Okay, hi guys. Welcome to the Alliance of Social Democrats. This is our YouTube session. We really appreciate everyone who's here, who's joining us. Please also remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please do share with your followers, with your friends, with your family. It's really great that it's really helpful to actually reach more people, because when we reach more people, we are able to have a much more long-lasting effect and impact throughout the country. Today we have a very interesting topic. I must admit that it's quite a new concept to me. It's something that we don't necessarily talk about enough, and I think that it's about time that we started talking about this issue, because it's becoming a part of us in one way or the other. It's becoming a serious issue that's affecting us, whether you are even in some instance, if you're not a woman, it could in some instance affect you, not necessarily because you're a woman, but also because you belong to particular groups. Maybe you are part of the LGBTQ plus cohort. It could also affect you. And what I am talking about right now is technology facilitated gender-based violence. Now we know what gender-based violence is. We have been bombarded with information. We have been in one form or the other experienced gender-based violence, depending on who you are. And the most important thing that comes out from that will come out from this discussion is the description of what technology facilitated gender-based violence is, because we need to understand and recognize that we are living in a digital age where we are living in a time where perpetrators have adopted tools that are much more smarter than before. They're able to do things smarter, quicker than they have before. And that's because of technology. So what this tells us is that technology, even though it has positive impact in our lives, in the convenience, we are able to do things quicker, we are able to gain access to certain things. It makes our lives easier, but it also makes the lives of perpetrators easier too, in a sense that they're able to abuse and to access people's privacy in ways that could have not been done before. So it's actually something that we actually need to start talking about. But today I have the formidable woman of the Alliance of Social Democrats, who will walk us through the topic of technology facilitated gender-based violence. So hi, ladies. How are you doing? I hope you are all well.
We are. Thanks,
Uh,
Jimmy.
we have Bianca, we have Robin, we have Manisha, and we were going to have Zanella. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today, but nonetheless, we have the formidable women who are well represented. We are well represented as the Alliance of Social Democrats, and I am quite happy with that. Bianca, how about I just start with you? If you could just describe to someone who doesn't know what technology facilitated gender-based violence is, if you could just walk me through and just give me an idea, so that as if I know nothing about it, just to explain what it is, and just to give me a description that will enable me to share it with other people, and to describe to other people what this concept or this phenomenon is.
Thanks, Jimmy. I think you covered a bit of it in your introduction. And what you said was true, is that we have got technological tools that actually make it very easy to harass people continuously. We so for instance, you've got online tools that everyone has access to you to on a continuous basis. And it takes different forms. So it's from gender-based harassment to stalking, right through to actual, sexual harassment online. And what makes it so dangerous and especially harmful to the victim or survivor of this kind of harassment is that it is these individuals can be anywhere and have access to you all the time. So it can be a continuous, it can go on continuously. The only way that it's very easy, and also what social media allows you to do is you can actually hide your identity. So there is no repercussions. You can't actually contact someone or contact someone's employer and say, do you know this is happening, and stop it. You can't really stop it. So I think you covered it nicely, but I think besides individuals being attacked online, you have also got what we have to realize, that it's a systemic thing. Because what is happening is women are being silenced, and as you mentioned, the LGBTQ community are also a big focus when it comes to this kind of harassment or GBV.
So it's easy for people to hide behind the veil of anonymity. Basically, just creates a fake account with a weird name, and it's easier for them because that's where the confidence comes in. The fact that you don't know who they are, and so they can just lay it out. So like say whatever it is, just so like have their hate being displayed on social media. So that's one of the things that make it rather difficult. Would you agree? In terms of actually trying to get a grasp or to get a handle on this. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And another part of this is what we call networked harassment. So you've got a lot of, so what happens is they actually when they are harassing someone, what they do is they network, and you'll notice that on one woman's timeline, you'll find a network of anonymous trolls that are busy, stoking the fire, and they'll continue. And if you react to it, it just goes further. Yeah. So it's just very easy to get away with it.
So I don't know, maybe if Robin can also jump into this. So what you're saying is that some of the attacks are coordinated, sort of like strategic in a way, whilst others could be really just a guy who feels that for some reason he is obligated to send an unsolicited picture of himself to a woman, thinking that it would somehow amuse this woman, So there are different levels of this type of harassment. Is that what you've observed also, Robin, in this case?
So absolutely. So I don't think this is a foreign concept. I think in gender-based violence, as it is, we have this kind of graded approach to the violence. We have this graded approach to understanding harassment. So, we've got stories about girls or women who get street harassment, such as catcalling or comments. And, often the attitude will be, oh, well, that's not that bad. Like on the scale of gender-based violence, 1 to 10, street harassment isn't that bad. But it is all indicative of a society that is quite, rotten through to the core, because once you start allowing little acts of violence towards women, which inform an attitude and an ideology, a misogynistic ideology, so then it becomes a sliding scale, and it's very much the same with this kind of online abuse that we see. So you have those one-off incidences where it's a man who his response to a woman, or even other women's response to a woman, is incredibly misogynistic. It's and it's got those kind of red flags that speak to the attitudes towards women that invoke a sense of hatred and toxicity. So whether it's denying the lived experiences of women, whether it's silencing them, whether it's erasing them, whether it is victim blaming or perpetuating rape culture, those one-off comments, well, within the grand scheme of things, perhaps we're able to look at them and go, oh, that was an isolated incident. they actually perpetuate a much larger problem. And then definitely there are networks, there are people who orchestrate this kind of, you know, coordinated attack. And I'll call it an attack because, you know, a lot of people will kind of see what's going on. And I've sort of experienced this week, so that's why it's top of mind. But they will see what's going on and their response will either be, I don't take it that seriously. Like, I mean, I had someone suggest to me that I was being too serious. Like, oh, come on, it's just,
No. I just want to add to what you're saying. Yeah, maybe you can also supplement what I'm saying, is that like the idea of sending unsolicited pictures, right? I think there was a discussion online about this, and I saw guys actually saying that, hey, well, whatever. Like it's normal to send a D-pic, let me just say it, to an unsuspecting victim, and it's like whatever, you know. And it's as if the concept of how can I consent, I think is remote in people's minds, in young people's minds, particularly men. And it's not just as you've correctly mentioned with catcalling. So to them it's like, you know, it's like whatever. So and it's the same thing with the digital harassment. So I was just adding to what you were saying, Robin, that the idea of consent is do you think that consent is multi-layered like that, or is it something that needs to be better instilled in young people or
I mean,
men in general?
I think the other thing is that, I mean, this is all, I think what's happening online is it's a complete reflection of what's been happening for decades offline. And so to Bee's point, what technology is doing is enabling it to not only happen more quickly, but to almost happen more often, because no longer, you know, if you were having to enact these kind of abuses in the real world, if you were having to get yourself into a space where you were able to expose your manhood to a woman, that's an incredibly difficult thing to orchestrate. But online, you know, I've often said we do have too much access in terms of information about one another, and that is both social media's saving grace and the ability to connect people across, you know, I've met all of you online, so I wouldn't be a member of ASD without being online. And so it's a saving grace of what's online, but it is also almost this, and for some reason it's almost like this readily accepted negative to social media, where people just have this attitude now where it's like, oh, well, you're online, what do you expect? It's like, well, I expect people to not harass me, and I expect people to not send me rape threats, and I expect people to not send me pictures of their penises. So it's almost like a disconnect where maybe she died because it's happening online. People can send something and not be responsible for it, and people
absolutely.
And it's almost like a disembodiment where they are not what they've done and they are not what they've said, because it's not them, because they're hiding behind a fake profile. So effectively they almost disown it, and they don't have to be responsible for it, they don't have to live with it, they don't have to suffer repercussions for it, and but they continue to do it without acknowledging that it's incredibly sick and toxic behavior.
Absolutely. I see Zanele has joined us. Zanele, welcome. If you don't mind, you can switch on your
camera.
Your camera and welcome. It's good to have the more voices we have, the better.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I'm listening in.
Okay, that's great. If you want to jump in, maybe you can also jump in. What we were talking about, we just defined what technology facilitated gender-based violence is. We also then went ahead to sort of like give like some examples, like a few examples of what happens, and also talked about but we also talked a little bit about the enablers of technology sorry about that, but what I'm trying to say basically is that right now we want to talk about a little bit about how what are the things that we can, the early detectors, what are the enablers, and what are the things that will somehow help us in terms of being able to warn young people, basically, because we were talking about young people, we're talking about young girls, because I know that there's a lot of literature out here talking about technology facilitated gender-based violence, and in one of the literatures, it also highlighted the fact that more women and girls make use of social media in comparison to boys. So which also puts them at a higher risk of being victims of cyberbullying. So I don't know, in your opinion, as Zanele, how would you manage that around? Like in terms, I want to talk about the girl child right now. How would you manage that around, and what sort of how can I put it, safety nets would you put in place in order to somehow safeguard young girls from becoming victims of such a thing? And it's important that we have this discussion, because children these days, it's inevitable that they will make use of technology, and as studies show, more young girls make use of social media. So in your opinion, how would you how would you how would you girls from this type of abuse?
Yeah. No, thank you for the opportunity, Jimmy. It's sorry if I switch on my video, then I lose the sound.
Okay. Okay, no problem.
Yeah. It's a very difficult subject, you know, and I always say I think it's a good thing that I do not have any daughters, because I would never allow them out of the house, because to me it sounds like life is just getting even more and more difficult for the girl child. You know, and what I find is that also it's difficult to keep your children indoors because you are afraid of what they might encounter out there. So I wouldn't actually even know the first thing that I need to do. I think sitting down and talking with the girls might be one of the strategies that we can employ in order to keep them safe, and which in a way is unfair, because we are now victimizing them also. But it's just better if they have better information, because these things are happening out there, you know. I really, honestly, it's a difficult
Inevitably.
subject.
Yeah. So education is important, as that's what I'm hearing. I don't know, Bianca, you want to add?
I want to add, and Zanele actually also mentioned it now when she said, yeah, it's actually unfair on the girls, because again, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, so women now have to again take the burden on and make sure that men don't behave badly. Okay.
Absolutely.
But I think again, women have got to the stage where they know they need to educate. But also another thing is this issue of and I think we need to do something about it, is this underlying thing of, come on, you must be a good girl now. You mustn't say anything. Don't make a fuss. And I've got to a stage, and I even get, and I've got friends online that say, oh no, just ignore. And when you see, when you see people getting attacked, and I'm thinking, really, okay, so we ignoring the behavior. They might leave you alone, so because you've actually taken the oxygen away from the situation, but they are going to harass someone else, and they just carry on and on with this kind of behavior. So I think one of the things that needs to be part of that education is expose. The moment it happens, bring it up, and don't feel that, no, you must just put it aside, in my view.
Yeah. Can I just say,
I don't know. Manisha. Yeah. So Manisha, I was just going to ask you actually if you want to add on to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing about technology, what it's done is many women, and I have a daughter who I speak with constantly. She's a teenager, and so these are discussions we have all the time. And the one thing that many women feel in a social media space is a lack of agency and a lack of choice. It's a lot easier when somebody is in your face physically, like on the street, and grabs you. You can react in a way that gives you a sense of not power, but you can feel like you've done something concrete. You can, as a woman, you can. We can react. When you're online and there are probably 1 million or 1 billion people watching your every move, when somebody anonymous begins to attack you, and I've watched this with, it hasn't, thankfully has never happened to me, but I've watched it with many other women. And I think I've been drawn to some of the women in this group precisely because I've watched it happen to them. And I've watched how it can take away agency, and you have to respond in a way that so that you can take your agency back. And in a situation like that, to see women or even men saying, behave yourself, let them go on, and I think it's the wrong message. I think this is a time when women who are not victims, but who are being attacked, need the support so that they can so that they can not reclaim even, but assert their agency, assert their choices. And that is what I think, that's the big difference between social media and other forms of GBV, in that this agency and choice and support has to be seen online in a different way. It has to be handled in a different way that allows women to reclaim it and not to simply become meek. Even when you block and you keep quiet, it doesn't help much, because as Bianca says, they'll move on to someone else. They'll find another victim, and you don't want that. You want to be able to say, I claim my space here. I claim my little, it might be my little bubble of friends, but I claim it. And you do not have the right, just like I limit who enters my home, I will limit who enters my space. And that's where social media where we need to negotiate those spaces. How do we claim it and hold on to it?
I agree.
I fully agree with you, Manisha. Fully agree with you. And I also like what also came out from this discussion about the idea of telling girls and women to behave, and moving away from that and moving towards the actual problem, which is the boys and the men. And perhaps we should start telling them to behave, and in some of the literature that I came across when reading up on this topic, was that a lot of the cases, some of them start small, and they develop into what also Robin also spoke about, rape culture. They become normalized, and they become the norm. And amongst young men, they become like a normal thing, even though they have actually crossed the boundaries. Things like upskirting, things like sharing particular type of pornography on social media, and engaging with that type of content on social media without the realization that there is a victim behind that video that's being posted, and the concept of the victim in the video is absolutely remote in the minds of men and in the minds of young people. And then so we ask ourselves, how do we then tackle that? How do we then cement the reality that actually consent is a thing. Recording is people without consent is a crime. Posting pictures of people without their consent, whether those pictures are them dressed or otherwise, is a crime. How do we how do we instill that conversation? How do we make that conversation something that people actually talk about? Because a lot of people don't want to talk about that. It's like an uncomfortable conversation to have, but we have to sort of like talk about that directly in order to get into the minds of young people, and particularly men, to actually show them that, hey, this is not a weird thing that you're just experiencing. It's actually a crime, and it's actually a wrong it's actually a negative thing in terms of society. So how do we start those conversations, and how do we actually facilitate those conversations? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that.
I think
I know it's you know.
I think any society, any functioning society has got certain sanctions. Okay, so we've got certain, you know what civility is. Most of us know what it is. And if you do not meet certain levels of civility, then society kind of shifts you out. The thing with online harassment and gender-based violence is that there seems to have developed some group that actually confirms that this is okay. Okay. And I think when it comes to sanctions, we need to make sure that it's not just the individual woman that's trying to, you know, as Manisha says, claim her agency. It's actually all of us that actually work with, you know, actually see the behavior and immediately take it on. And when I say take it on, you expose, you make sure you expose, because what they're doing is they're shaming, normally shaming the victim or the survivor. So they're busy shaming them. So what you do is you expose people like that, and you make sure that that your group, that us as a society actually take them on that way. You don't leave someone to their own devices trying to fight off a whole lot of anonymous trolls. You actually do something.
Yeah. So basically, it's more of like a social type of solution where we actually, in one way, expose and condemn publicly these type of acts, so that it can somehow cement and be programmed in people's minds that, hey, actually, this is not a normal behavior. This is actually antisocial behavior.
Exactly.
But then also, what I want to also talk about, would like for us to jump into, I know that Robin wrote a very powerful article on this type of on this topic, but then also spoke about the cybercrimes bill, which is basically has to be some form of recourse, some form of consequence for these acts that people do online. So I don't know, Robin, if you'd like to just give us an idea or a brief description of what the bill is all about, and what exactly it is trying to achieve.
So basically it's long overdue, if we're honest, but it's intended to bring South Africa's cybercrimes law up to an international standard, which fantastic for us as a country, but this issue of technology facilitated gender-based violence is also something that the international community is still grappling with. And if you ask me, we've got a long way to go. Particularly in terms of getting the platforms to be held accountable and to protect their users. But effectively, it's a step forward in the direction of defining cybercrime as a sort of a pocket of criminal activity that is worthy of being legislated about, and also pursuing legal recourse. Initially, if there was a case that you were trying to push in terms of cyber harassment, your only option was to basically sue using defamation of character or crimen jura, or if they had published pictures of you in, lewd acts or naked, then that was also something that you could, open a case for. So then you could sue for a protection order. But all of these things were defined under the domestic abuse sort of court of law. So even when I went through the process of getting a protection order for a cyber stalker earlier this year, you end up going into the domestic violence court in order to, open this case and take the steps that you have to take. Now, obviously, that's also if you are lucky enough to get a police officer who doesn't laugh you out of the police station when you walk into the police station and you say, hi, someone's abusing me online. And they'll, my lawyer, she's done many cases of this, and she's had several police officers who, when she walked in, and, this is no stretch of the imagination that this happens, because they do it to women who are married and their abusers are their husband. And they'll say, oh, no, that's something you sort out at home. So now you must walk in and say, hi, I'm being abused online, or I'm being harassed online, and they'll laugh at you. So I think, while I understand this act is very important and it's a step in the right direction, where we tend to continually fall short, particularly when it comes to helping victims of gender-based violence, is its implementation. And that implementation needs to filter through right down to the clerk who's working in the court. It's the policeman who is working and who thinks that this kind of harassment of women is as serious and as deserving of his time and attention as anything else. So it's
and
basically
also
yes?
Sorry, Robin. I just wanted to add also the capacity of our justice system, or rather the police. Because if they can't even handle like DNA samples, which are at a backlog of about 1 million and holding back about 300,000 cases, how can you expect these same people to manage the complexities of cyber crimes?
Yeah, and I mean, interestingly enough, when I went into, obviously there's a process to getting a protection order, and the final step is to go in front of a judge who makes the ruling. And the first thing that the judge said to me, she was a woman, so effectively the idea that women judges are, or that women are aligned to protecting women, I mean, that's not a given. But it made me realize firstly that if I was a rape victim, which I've been, if she was the judge on my case, I would physically have left the room and not gone back, because her entire manner was dismissive, and you could almost imagine that she had that attitude towards whoever, as if it was. But the first thing she said to me was, well, if you don't want to be contacted online, why are you online? So there's this almost prevailing attitude that, same with women who go to parties and end up getting raped, by women choosing to be online, by me choosing to have my DMs open, I am the one who has invited this kind of conduct into my life. And therefore, the act is one thing, but it's got to be education in terms of educating people about their rights with relation to the act. It's got to be education about educating the infrastructure, the police and the legal teams and the judges who preside over these cases, that this is a serious offense. It's got to be, the other thing they say about punishment is that it's not the severity of the punishment, but the certainty of it, which is what deters crime. Now we've got platforms that will have people's behavior reported to them, and they will rule that nothing is wrong. And because it doesn't use an F word, or it's, the picture that's been reported isn't something that they believe is offensive, because it's not actually human beings who are viewing the context, it's just a program. So the issue is that the tendency to overlook these problems and to overlook this abuse of women, it's almost built into the technology. So there is no certainty of being punished. And you can see that by the way that these people operate, and they do what they do and say what they say without fear of any repercussion.
Absolutely.
I think at
Absolutely.
some point,
Manisha, would you
maybe,
like to add?
sorry,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I think at some point it may do South Africa well, considering the high number of cases of GBV in our country, to consider even creating separate structures to deal specifically with. I'm just putting this out there. I haven't thought it through completely, but when you read the statistics and you when you can start counting on more than one hand the number of close friends or associates you have who've experienced this kind of problem, I think we need to start saying something needs to be done. And we've got the laws in place, and now as Robin says, it needs to be enacted. And how do you do that? You start at the bottom and you work your way up. How do you do that? You get civil society involved. You get ordinary people involved, and you maybe look at creating separate courts, separate training, specific earmarked people within the structures to deal with the issue from the bottom until it becomes a norm. Like you deal with a murder case, you then deal. And I'm not saying to normalize the fact that we're dealing with GBV, but we really need to work at educating from the bottom, and maybe considering our history and all of the other challenges we're facing, maybe this is something that organizations and civil society can get involved in, looking at ways of creating structures, creating support systems and education systems that work with police, police that have been chosen to deal with the issue, people who have a certain empathy, doctors, even doctors and nurses. You go into a public hospital, you're lucky if you find a nurse or a doctor who's sympathetic or empathetic towards your cause. So
educating from the bottom, I like that. I like that, Manish. Educating from the bottom, and it's very important that we educate, but then we also use the same weapon that the perpetrators are using, but in a positive way, using the technology in a
yes,
positive way. Particularly people, young boys, for example. It's
absolutely.
different now. Where it's not just school and home. The information that they get, the lessons that they learn, the habits that they develop, they're not just coming from school and home. They're actually coming from a variety of websites that are out there that can't even be controlled or managed or blocked. So one way or the other, as a society, we also have to catch up with the pace at which disinformation and the pace of which rape culture is penetrating the minds of young people. Wouldn't you agree, Bianca?
Absolutely. I agree that we need to catch up. I must also say I'd love to see if there was, you see, there's a lot of international research, well, and it's relatively new, the area. Robin also mentioned it. There's a lot of international research on the ages, the type of victims that are targeted, whereas in South Africa, my personal experience and what I've seen on the women that I mix with online, it's not our young boys. But those young boys are going to get older, I suppose. My concern is
yes, of course. Yes.
These are
Yes,
individuals.
because it starts at a young age. So they think that it's normal
Yes.
for a person to take a video of an upskirt or something like that, or for a person to have pictures of someone without their consent. They start young because nowadays they have access to a whole range of things thanks to smartphones. So and then they grow up to become like those men who are perpetrators nowadays.
Mm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, I interrupted
so
you. Sorry.
it progresses along the way, but I think education is key. But with the absence of, I would say, decent sanctions, it's not likely to change. There has to be a sanction. You need to actually feel the pinch. And I can tell you, we've had accounts that, for instance, for years stalk, and you report, and then you try everything. I mean, if you look at Robin's article, and you look at the articles preceding that regarding her specific incident, you'll know that there were women that actually landed up in hospital because of years of stalking and harassing. And this is by one person. This is by one individual. So there needs to be sanctions, and that is, and I think I'm just not sure how we can put them in place. I currently, as I say, my process is exposed. So,
I'm just thinking, and this for me is where the platforms themselves need to come to the party, because thinking specifically of this individual to whom Bianca is referring, he has had hundreds of accounts.
Yes.
Like hundreds. And there must be something that the platforms, or some form of information that they've got access to, whether it's an IP address or whatever, that, you know, there would be some kind of red flag when this person is being reported over and over and over. But, you know, the fact that these platforms don't carry out these reportings, they don't carry out the reviews, they don't carry out anything on a personal level. It's all automated, and I understand it's automated because of the sheer size of what it is they're trying to deal with. But at this point, you know, for 10 years, this person has been doing this on and off, and it's a fake account, a new one every single time. And it can't be that what stops us from applying sanctions, from what stops us from getting justice, is the fact that they changed their username, is the fact that they deleted their account and set up a new one. The fact that that tiny aspect is standing in the way of justice is something that, like, it brutally undermines the Constitution. It brutally undermines, it's becoming a public health and a human rights issue. And that is where we've got to get the platforms to take responsibility and come to the party. They won't, because they're money-making businesses first and foremost, but it does need to change, because until they do, they are perpetuating this cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think before that even happens, we're probably going to see, it's why I say that we need to start pushing. The more ordinary people get involved, the more we start saying, okay, so South Africa has a law in place. Now we're going to start holding the powers that be, the courts. We're going to hold you responsible for enacting those laws. We're going to give you the tools. We're going to train whoever needs to be trained to enact those laws. And as soon as you start doing that, then maybe these platforms will have to start responding, because if they don't, they probably will be kicked out. And you're seeing that happen in some parts of the world, and it might happen in on a bigger scale, and that's what we want. And it goes back to us doing the work as well.
Yeah.
This is not just a thing where a group of people get together and say, let's talk about this, let's complain about it, or we actually need to take the next step and look at ways of addressing it, dealing with it, offering solutions to everybody that is involved, from the person that's being stalked to the person that is representing them in court, or taking their statement at a police station, all of them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Manisha. I see we are just about an hour into our discussion. It's a very lovely discussion, but I'd also like to save some of the energy for this Sunday. So I don't know if maybe we'd like to make like closing remarks. Maybe if we could just go around the room. Maybe I can start with you, Bianca. Just your closing remarks and things that you probably wanted to say that you were unable to say, and just to sort of like summarize your position.
Okay, so like I said, the summary of my position would be there needs to be sanctions and we need to work together. And I agree with Manisha and with Robin that there should be action. Zanele also mentioned around the education. I just don't think the burden of it should be on women again. You know,
it should be
but
education for everyone, basically.
Education for everyone. And but finally, what I want to say is we have no idea what the individual on the other side of our computer screen, phone, whatever is going through. And it can be that one vicious remark that just pushes them over the edge. You know, I'm an adult woman and I've got a support system around me, so I can handle a bit of trolling and viciousness. I shouldn't have to, but I can. The thing is that you don't know when you are that person that is going to say that one thing that is going to push the person over. And I think that's what we need to actually focus on, is what harm are we doing at that stage?
Absolutely, absolutely. Robin?
I think that's so well said, B, because, you know, I think, again, people's tendency to believe that what it is they're saying is separate to them, then almost increases the viciousness and the way in which they sort of continue. It's so continuous and it's just relentless. The other thing that I want to just, in terms of learned experience that I do want to share, particularly to any other women or girls who find themselves being in such a position, is collect the evidence. And, you know, obviously in the absence of a rape kit, in the absence of physical violence, in the absence of any kind of evidence, real world evidence that would be put to use in the prosecution of a case, technologically facilitated gender-based violence doesn't have that. So they tend to put a lot of emphasis on the evidence that you collect, and it can be quite difficult because you know, through collecting that evidence, you are then having to see it, you're having to save it, you're having to read it, you're having to take it on, and that in itself, I would just suggest possibly asking friends to help, because it's, you know, none of us are incapable of being hurt, and so it can be a very difficult thing to do. So if you do find yourself in a position, enlist a friend, or if you're able to, just somehow steel yourself towards collecting that evidence, because that will be what comes down to the difference between getting a protection order or not, or the difference between getting a conviction with the Cybercrimes Act or not.
Yes, and also, Robin, in terms of saving the evidence, I read somewhere where they say that they also advise that if you can, then I just wonder that, like, if you block someone, effectively you delete that content, and yet on the other side, you might need the live content still there. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, which is why I say, you know, enlisting that community, enlisting that friend who's able to do that for you. There are tools that, and possibly I'll provide some more information on that on Sunday, or we can do a thread of them on ASD. There's also tools that help you protect yourself. So, you know, I think in the interests of helping people, we could share those onto the ASD Twitter, because
I think so.
Yeah, it's just, it shouldn't happen, and it does far too readily.
Absolutely.
Zanele? No, I say one of the reasons I'm actually glad that I think the fleets have now been removed from Twitter, because some of the perverts were now doing that, you know, knowing that it will disappear. One guy was actually just using this. So, but I saw somewhere that the fleets have now been removed. So that is a good thing, yeah, because they knew they were doing something wrong. But yeah, no, thank you so much. I've learned so much today. The evidence, I think, is very, very important. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Zanele. And Manisha, any closing remarks?
I think everybody's pretty much summed up what I have to say. I just maybe pick up on what Robin said and emphasize the support. Nobody needs a patronizing pat on the back, but everybody needs support, especially when you're in a situation like that, especially when this is it's largely anonymous and we don't know. I mean, I think we've all met online, and it's maybe the first or the second time or the third time that we've actually interacted, but still not directly, but online. None of us know what each of us go through in our own homes. So support, support, support. Being there, just one word, I've got you, or two, 3 words, I've got your back. 4, is that 3? 4. I can't, sorry, my brain. But I've got your back. A simple expression like that, you know.
Yes.
That's all they need to know at sometimes, you know. And when somebody turns to you for help, say, yes, sure, I'm there for you. You need me to collect the evidence for you, I'll do that. You need me to report it, I'll do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, thank you so much. An eye-opening session, really. I look forward to Sunday's session also. Thank you guys for sharing your insights. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure our viewers will appreciate the discussion and the pearls of wisdom that you guys have added into the session. And to those who are watching, please also remember to subscribe, and also please remember to share, and join us again on Sunday. This is the Alliance of Social Democrats. Thank you for joining us.